Good afternoon. I'm Danielle Knapp. I'm the Makash curator here at the JSMA, and I'm so thankful that you're attending our program today, a talk with Klamath Modoc artist, writer, activist, mentor, busy person, Ka'ila Farrell-Smith, whose work is featured in the traveling exhibition, Many Wests, Artists Shape an American Idea, that's on view at JSMA galleries, in 3 galleries through December 18th. Along with our co-curating partners, the Smithsonian American Art Museum, the Whatcom Museum, the Boise Art Museum, and the Utah Museum of Fine Arts, we collectively acknowledge and honor that there are 12 tribal communities whose lands our institutions reside on. So those of us who worked on the exhibition, that includes Ka'ila's painting enrollment, honor that and recognize that for many of us, we are uninvited guests on those lands and that our institutions reside there. Here at the University of Oregon, we are on Kalapuya Ilihi, the traditional indigenous homelands of the Kalapuya people who were dispossessed of their land and removed to the coastal reservations between 1851 and 1855 by the US government. Kalapuya people were forcibly removed, and their descendants are now members of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. For any members of Native communities who are with us today, I especially welcome you. I thank you for coming to the program, and I hope that in the exhibition you find that the artworks and the stories shared honor this region as a place that has always and will always be the land of the indigenous original inhabitants. Thanks to generous support from Art Bridges, we were able to invite Ka'ila to be a creative in residence this term, working with many of the audiences that our museum serves during the time that Many Wests is on view, making multiple trips to campus over the last few weeks. She's been meeting with faculty and undergraduate and graduate students from various departments, building connections between her lived experiences, her artwork, her critical writing, her activism through conversations with our staff and students and members of different communities here. Later this year, she'll be one of our special guest jurors for our annual program, New Northwest Kids, a show of K through 12 children's art and student art, the theme of which draws from Many Wests this year and is titled The Places We Imagine. I'm especially excited to present her work in Many Wests among 47 other modern and contemporary artists who are featured in the show, because her painting enrollment was a JSMA acquisition in 2018, made possible in part with generous support from the Department of Native American and Indigenous Studies here on campus. And I thank Professor Kirby Brown for lending this departmental support at that time, and to him and his colleagues for continuing to support our efforts to increase representation and engagement with contemporary Native American and Indigenous artists, especially of the Pacific Northwest, here at JSMA in our collections and our exhibitions and our programming. And so because of this, as the exhibition travels on through January 2024, through its 2 final venues after JSMA on its 5-venue run, Ka'ila's painting will be shown in Salt Lake City and Washington, D.C. through January 2024. And I'll also mention that 2 other artists in the show, Marie Watt, will be speaking next Thursday in Lawrence Hall for the Art Department Lecture Series on Thursday, 4 p.m. And Wanda Diaz-Mora will be here November 16th to speak at JSMA. So a lot going on. And thank you so much for being with us here today to give an artist talk. And so please join me in welcoming Ka'ila for her presentation.
Thank you, Danielle, for that wonderful introduction. Can you all hear me all right? Excellent. Okay. Hi, so my name is Ka'ila Farrell-Smith. I'm an artist, activist, writer, creative person, and have done a lot of activism work on the front lines over the last few years. So I'm going to give you a presentation today talking about my most recent work. And when I say that, I'm like kind of going back to about 2018 and talking about the Land Back series, the Ghost Rider chapter that I wrote and finished last year, and it will be published soon. And so yeah, so let's get started here. I want to talk about the piece that's in this exhibition. Enrollment. So yeah, the piece Enrollment is an oil painting and graphite on canvas. I think I got those dimensions right, 72 by 36, so it's a big piece, tall piece. And it was created in 2014. And so yeah, this was a piece that was created in my graduate program. So I was working on my thesis, my Master's of Fine Art degree at Portland State University at the time. And yeah, to kind of to discuss this piece, I was, in doing my thesis work, I was really kind of went back to school. I had done my undergraduate degree at Pacific Northwest College of Art, graduating in 2004. And I took off, about 8 years in between my undergraduate degree and my graduate degree, and was doing a lot of environmental activism work. Kind of have always juggled the importance of like standing up, defending environment, defending environmental issues, and that's always been something I've been very passionate about. And so I wasn't really ready to I didn't know how to be a capitalist, an artist and capitalist, and like when I was 21 years old. So I took about 8 years in between my studies, and I kind of got burnt out as well in the environmental field, and working with nonprofits and that kind of advocacy and community organizing. I gained a lot of skills, and then I'm kind of going to come full circle with this talk about this concepts of art and activism. So anyways, I decided, I'm going to go back to school, and so I was creating work, talking about decolonization, kind of cultural identity. And also at that time, 2014 was when my father, Al Smith, passed away. So there was a lot going on in, I think that it was the same year, actually. Maybe I painted this right before then. But there was a lot happening in my studio, let's just say. A lot of emotional things, kind of discussing really heavy topics. One of the books that I was studying was Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. So kind of talking about that, this is what was created in my studio at that time, one of these paintings. So you're seeing a figure on a light background. There was a lot happening, a lot of color, a lot of graphic elements, bright colors that was underneath this painting, and I hated it. This was always the struggle that happens with me in the studio, and so I just took a lot of white paint and just covered over it. And I started using a lot of squeegees at this time. I was moving away from using a brush, the paintbrush. So, and I was doing a lot of printmaking. And so with printmaking, there's squeegees and palette knives, and there's all sorts of other tools. And, you can roll out some ink and then scrawl back into it. So I was finding new ways of mark making. And I think all of this was kind of culminating and coming to place with some of my thesis work, including this piece. So the figure is wrapped in a Hudson Bay blanket. So you'll see that as kind of a really bold visual image. At that same time, I was seeing the Hudson Bay blanket as a very kind of trendy visual and physical object. So these blankets were popular, especially up in Canada. I was seeing them in fashion, like seeing on cool looking sneakers, like they're just like these trendy blankets. And a lot of times they were, with settler people that were using them, not indigenous people. So the history, though, of these blankets, the Hudson Bay, company, is that they were used to deliver a biological weapon. It was biological warfare against indigenous people, and smallpox was put into the blankets and given to tribal peoples. And so, this is an element of genocide. It's a very messed up and very disturbing part of our colonized history. And so that kind of came into it as it's a very bold part of the painting. It's a bold element, and you can see that black stripe, yellow, red, and green stripe, and then the points, the 3-point. Excuse me, I don't know all my blanket history. You'll have to come to Marie Watts to talk more about that. But yeah, there's sort of this handprint or a red or maybe a blood streak, that's kind of going across the bottom. And I kind of see the blue as representing water. A lot of times for me, when I see my paintings years after I've made them, it like makes more sense to me of like what's going on with them. But that is my enrollment number that's kind of etched into the red stripe. So 1807C is my Klamath tribal member number. And at the same time too, I was in graduate school, and there was lots of other Indigenous or Native students in different programs, and we would talk, and like we were all struggling and and having hard times, like finding our voices in these institutions and in these critique spaces, right? And so this is also a painting about blood quantum. So a lot of the tribes, you have to prove you have to prove how much Indian blood you have in you, whether you have to show a certificate of Indian blood or you have to show your tribal ID card. And that was always really disturbing and a troubling thing. And so and I still still is something that, I think about, and being one of the only, I don't know. It's like dogs and Indians are the ones who would have to prove how much blood is something, this breeding thing. And this is just really messed up. So anyways, that's kind of a lot of the ideas and concepts that were going into this piece. I think the figure's hair has grown out a lot longer. Before this, I was painting images of figures that had their hair chopped off, which was a reference to the boarding school. So I have a piece called After Boarding School and Mourning, which is a part of the permanent collection of the Portland Art Museum. So this piece was created after that, and so the hair is kind of elongated. It's definitely a kind of an unnatural the way the head's going back. But I don't know, I see it as maybe a song or a prayer or there's kind of violence and pain, but also some redemption or sublimity that's going on with the figure. And I like to hold contradictory, images that can have multiple different things that you can feel when you look at it. So just so you know, when you go see the exhibition, this is where the painting is, and it's in really, James Lavador has been, I've looked up to these artists for the 20 years of my studying and creating my professional practice. So it's really great to see my painting next to a James Lavador, and of course the late Rick Bartow, who I think is one of his last self-portraits. Rick, I met Rick. Well, actually, I think I was like in camps with Rick when I was a little kid making like cedar masks and stuff like that. But professionally, after I graduated from PNCA, Pacific Northwest College of Art, in 2004, I got invited to go to work at an art camp in Siletz. And so that was the first time I got to meet Rick and see all of his studios. And he had like an Airstream where he did printmaking, a house that was built, I think, by Saks Fifth Avenue. That was where he did his charcoal drawing. So that was a really amazing time. And so I've been able to follow, I went back and did the Master's in Fine Arts because I wanted to have the degree to teach. But he had told me a long time ago, the only reason to get a master's degree is if you want to teach. But if you want to be an artist, you just have to make the work. And so I kind of got similar advice from James when I got to visit his studio going to Crochetado a few years ago. So anyways, it's really an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here in my hometown. I grew up here in Eugene, Oregon. And just want to acknowledge my mother, Jane Farrell, and my brother, Laylit, came out. And just want to so we're going to get talking a little bit more about some of my recent work. So anyways, that's kind of my introduction to the piece that's in this exhibition enrollment. So I'm going to dive into the talk about Land Back, which is a series that I was working on from 2019 to 2021. And Ghost Rider, Performing Fugitive Indigeneity. And I don't know if anybody went to my exhibition at Ditch Projects, but all of this work was up last summer for the month of August in Springfield. So yeah, doing land acknowledgements. So I'm a Klamath Modoc tribal member. I was born in Ashland, Oregon. I moved up here. I think I was around 2 years old, so Springfield, Eugene area is really my stomping grounds where I grew up. But I always go down to visit my tribal ancestral homelands, even as a child, through field trips with my parents and my family. And so this is Williamson River at Singing Rock. So it's a really powerful place. This is, where the Klamath Modoc Paiute people are at the headwaters. We're at the headwaters of the Williamson River, Spring Creek, Wood River. So this is all these amazing spring waters that just pour out of the earth. It's Crater Lake, Giwas. So it's a very sacred place still to this day. And so, but there's so much history of, land theft, water diversions. We're constantly in these water wars down in Southern Oregon. So this is what you're looking at is south. So that's like Mount Shasta area. So Chiloquin is just north of Klamath Falls. So I'm kind of in between Klamath Falls and Crater Lake. So I just want to show you that because this is, when I say land back, we want our land back. We were our tribe was terminated in 1954. We don't have a land base, and that's really messed up. And Indigenous people to have that sovereignty and to be able to take care of our forests and do the work we need to do to stop these wildfires every summer. There's just so much work to do. And so when a lot of artists are using the word land back right now, and I really mean it. It's not just some like trendy thing. We need to start being, we need to have that Indigenous stewardship for our lands and waters. So yeah, I just want to kind of introduce the land and my father, the late Alfred Leo Smith. And if you are from Eugene, I hope that you are familiar with who my father is and his relationship to Eugene and to this school and to this place. And his court case was Al Smith versus Oregon, um, which ended up with it was one of the biggest Native American freedom of religion cases in the history of the United States. And in 1994, they passed the amendment to the Native American, um, excuse me, the Native American Freedom of Religion Act. So it was an amendment in 1994. It's really important, and it ended up, really legalizing ceremonies and use of indigenous medicines like peyote for all Native people in this country. So it's a really important legacy. So I want to honor Al today in this place. And yeah, so since the last 7 or 8 years, since he passed, I've been through a lot, gone through a lot. And why I'm kind of talking about this is that the land back work really has been since I moved out of Portland. So I lived in Portland for 18 years. I studied, I worked, and juggled lots of jobs, did lots of artist residencies. And then I realized I just want to do my work and I want to move back to my homelands. And so I did. And so since then, I'm going to start talking about this piece, which is a lithograph that I made kind of in honor of my father. And, art is a way of healing. That's why I make art. It's for me to go through all the experiences that I have, and it's a way to express myself. And so I've been spending 20 years developing, my mark making techniques, what they mean to me, symbols. So these little coyotes pop up in my work. They represent kind of a trickster element to me. And Dad always called himself Red Coyote, and it was his restaurant name. So when we go out to eat, they'd say, "My name is Red Coyote," and so when they'd call, "Table for 4 for Red Coyote," and we just walk, he'd look all good with his hat and his long hair, and he didn't want to disappoint the spectators seeing a real Indian. So that was, the kind of the joke. I think though that humor, he had that. He came out in his the way he interacted in the world. And I think back, that's like, he lived a hard life, and that's for a long time. And, there's racism, there's all kinds of stuff, but that humor and that hard knocks way of like manipulating and going through the world. I learned a lot from him. And so anyways, this piece kind of came together like that. So there's the red ink. Kolya'awas means coyote in Klamath. And this is a 5-layer lithograph print, though, so just like technically, it was really, I went through a lot working with Judith Bauman, the master printer at Crow's Shadow, to translate my layers of how I paint into going into printmaking. And so you can see there's like that gray, kind of bluish gray is like a painterly mark, so that was one layer. There's the a yellow, it's kind of like a ochre yellow. I don't remember what kind of marks there are, but I was kind of like making more painterly marks. And then that deep red is like a Klamath basket design, as well as these little, the red coyotes, and there's white ones. So I'm kind of playing black or when I say black, I'm thinking of printmaking. So the darker in contrast and white ones. So there's a lot going on. And then they kind of finished up with that text layer with those scrawl marks. So yeah, this is the piece that, I made for Al. So yeah, just honoring the ancestors, bringing them into this space. For me, my relationship and with my father, how he left his homelands through boarding schools, all of that is kind of a part of this Land Back series and what I was writing about in the Ghostwriter Performing Fugitive Indigeneity chapter. So I'm kind of trying to give a sense of where I'm at. And so it's important because in 2018, that's when I left Portland. So that print, I had driven up from Modoc Point to Crow's Shadow, which is up in Pendleton. And so that was kind of the first work I was making since I left Portland, and my life changed a lot. And I'll have to say, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So I guess what I was going to say, 2016 was a really big transformative time in my life because I went to Standing Rock. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, but we'll just say that happened, and then I was fighting the Jordan Cove LNG pipeline, and I wanted to honor my father's legacy and kind of I don't know if it's recreate or reinvigorate my life in relationship to my homelands. ancestral homelands. And that's a lot because there's just so much that's, there's so much in the land, there's so much in that water, there's so much historical, conflict down in southern Oregon around Chiloquin. So, there's the water wars where we've been fighting pipelines. There's, a lot of tension between the ranching culture and the tribe we need to clean up our lakes, because our chwam and kopdu are going endangered. So those are the suckerfish that are only in that lake, the only place in the world that the kopdu and chwam live. So and they're getting old and the babies aren't able to live. So there's just so much, there's so much going on. So this is one of the pieces of the land back series. It was my favorite painting in the series, Off the Ground. And yeah, so I've been really also a part of the series. I was moving away from my heavy use of oil paints. The toxicity really started to impact me physically and my health, working with turpentines and inks and spray paint and all the stuff for like 15, 20 years. It gets to you eventually. And so I really had to make some big changes as well in 2016 with my diet and what I'm breathing in the studio. So I really did switch a lot to acrylics and harvesting my own wild pigments. So this whole series has wild pigments a part of it. So you can see that charcoal that was collected from a wildfire across the lake from where I live at Pelican Butte, where I hike. I love to go out and hike and kayak and stuff. So I'll harvest and bring home, bring cool pigments and then smash them up in my studio and mix them with acrylic gel mediums and make these paintings. So that's kind of the process. So there's the wild harvest. So you can kind of see that reddish tone behind. That's from the painted hills. So like it's this kind of earth red from the painted hills. And then where the text says bird, that's this chalk that it's like this chalk that's on the hillside when you are entering into Klamath Falls. And my dad said his grandma always said that they would stop and collect it and eat it. So I think there's calcium. There's calcium in it. So I'm using it for paint, but I think it's medicinal. So those are three of the wild pigments that are in this piece. You kind of see that energetic element coming down. Sometimes it's like a spirit, or it could be like, sometimes it looks like a pipeline, or there's kind of again, I like to use imagery that has dual, kind of brings up dual meanings for people. And so there's the wild pigments. There you can see that bird is a petroglyph of a thunderbird, or that's my interpretation of a thunderbird. And then I've been bringing in these lightning bolts. So that gold, and that's a gold paint. So I started also bringing in the metallic paint, so gold and copper and silver. And for me, in this, it's kind of a natural form, but sometimes in the paintings they'll like be more like a grid, like little squares, and then that, for me, that's sort of a representation of capitalism and resource extraction, especially like in Northern California, the gold rush, the gold, there's a lot of bloody history in this part of the world to get to all these minerals and resources, and the stencils. So then I have the detritus. So the stencils are the land back stencils, and so I had harvested. Not harvested. We just found a lot of stuff on the land when I moved to Modoc Point. And when I say we, I'm talking about me and my partner, Kale Christie. We have our dog Pele, and so we're kind of full-time, working on 18 acres and managing a barn, a big studio, a house, log house, or we're always patching it up. So lots of projects all the time. So at this point, Kale was actually finding a lot of weird machinery objects, and so some of those are like bullets, shot up cans, like random gritty things, and you'll see those. So I was using those as stencils throughout the whole paintings, and so kind of those combinations of layers are coming together into these paintings. And so this piece was purchased by the Portland Art Museum just recently, so it's in the permanent collection and will be on view in the future. Awesome. So yeah, this paintings, I kind of like to start with these small paintings. So I made 27 paintings in the land back series over 3 years, 2019 to 2021. This is like the first. So I started with these little ones. And I just kind of like want to show people, like I kind of got through these compositions at a small scale, and then I was like, this is working. Now I'm going to go bigger. And so that's kind of how I work now. I'm working on lots of different panels, lots of different sizes. Some stuff, not working, I can just throw it aside and, you know, continue working on lots of other work. So I just kind of like to show, like, this is a really big, or for me, a pretty big painting, and these are starting small. So I was kind of trying to replicate some of the compositions from small to big. And here you can see that piece. It's called Kai, which is it's a nickname. It was my nickname growing up because a lot of people couldn't pronounce my name, Ka'ila, so Kai. But Kai also is Klamath for rabbit. And so where I live, there's a lot of hares, like the big long ears, and they're hopping around. And the first winter I was there, it snowed really hard, and I was like, oh, they're my friends. Watch the bunny rabbits. And I'm like hiking around on my land. We had built this big trail around, and I just ran across this bloody mess of, it was like, I think a coyote had just totally killed one of those hares, and it was just like snow and blood and hair everywhere. And I made these paintings. I don't know. It was like kind of a crazy painting, or crazy winter. And so this is kind of launched. They look nice. And these are together. So this is another new thing for me, is kind of keeping pieces together. So this is one piece, but it's 9 little paintings, right? Or working in diptychs. So yeah, so here's some of that chalk I was talking about. So this is kind of what my palette looks like, crunching up or like smashing up this clay, and then there's some of that charcoal. I haven't figured out what to do with the moss yet, but I like the way it looks. So here's some of those stencils I was talking about. So, just they're cool shapes. I kind of like Dada art, you kind of like throw things around, spray paint them. And I do all my spray painting outside. I have a big mask on now because it does really impact me. But yeah, this is sort of like I guess I should have showed these slides while I was talking about all that. But yeah, you get the idea here. So this is like a stage where you can see, I used a bunch of gray, put some of those scrawl marks on. And then here's some of that detritus, the land back stencils. So there's barbed wire, and this is kind of what it looked like in one of the stages of one of those paintings. And so, I'll knock back a lot of these bright colors and kind of bring in that white, like I learned from making the enrollment painting. So, that was kind of a struggle, but then I realized, oh, this is a good technique I can use to like drag the white over these hot pink, super, could be, I have to push my paintings to be like, this is uglier. Like, it looks like I don't know, these are my opinions, but like art from the 80s, like way too much neon color. And so then I'll knock it back with a white and a squeegee. But what I'm doing formally is I'm creating grays, right? I'm creating a contrast in grayscales in that format. So, and I've learned, I've learned a lot of this through printmaking. So the process of printmaking really does help me think through this, and then I translate that into the studio when I'm making the paintings. So yeah, you can see that I'm also using stencils with some text. So this is, it says land back on between the two, and like that figure is super funny. It looks like kind of a weird robot to me sometimes. Some of these look like little alien spaceships. So there's all kinds of funny, that's what I see. I don't know what people see in my paintings, but I don't know. This was kind of a nice, you can see some of the earth tones in there as well. So yeah, this is Modoc Point. So this is Modoc Point Studio. This is where I fled and ran away from the cities and people. And yeah, I mean, my family, we have, we're all set up there. But yeah, it's 18 acres, and, it's up against Wainema National Forest Ridge. And this is, I kind of set up and made some of those paintings here in my barn, in the barn studio. That's my dog, Pele. Okay, so here's one of the finished paintings, another piece from that series. It's called No Man Camps, Missing Her. So this is definitely a piece discussing, I was really in the heart of fighting the Jordan Cove LNG pipeline at that time. This image is a little blown out. I probably should have put the Mario Gallucci picture, but it does say no LNG at the top, and there's that kind of white streaming down. The black, in this series, the blacks are the Pelican Butte wildfire charcoal, but that indigo. So that's a straight indigo from an oil bar that kind of looks like hair or something coming down. And this is like being, I can't give up the oil paint, so I use the oil bars for my last marks at the end, so I can smell it. I don't know. There's something about the oil paint. It's really hard to give up. But I don't use any of the turpentines anymore. You can see there's that some text in the back says SOS. there's AK-47. I don't know, there was a lot of like gun, you know, it was like, I live rural now, and like we have to like have guns, and there's, it's like four-wheel drive trucks, and like, it's, you know, it's a big difference, but in lifestyle. But you can kind of see how I'm using that gold is coming through again with the thunderbolt, lightning bolt, but you can see there's the gold squares at the top. There's some fingerprints, so there's definitely some ghosty kind of haunting imagery that's coming out in this series. And I will talk about this a little bit more, but I was writing this chapter at the same time, researching the ghost dance, researching a lot of really heavy topics regarding the pipeline, you know, because we have to make a lot of public comments. And so one of the things that I kept researching was the impact of resource extraction projects like in North Dakota. I learned that going to Standing Rock, that a lot of these young women and boys, Two-Spirit, you know, it's a huge health risk with so what a man camp is like, so say Jordan Cove, they wanted to build like this huge camp out at Coos Bay. It would, you know, they're bringing in hundreds and hundreds of men. A lot of them are out of state, so they're not local jobs. This is something that these companies always promise. And then they make, you know, they're making good money. And a lot of times though, that's rural places like in North Dakota or like in, say, Malin, Oregon, which is south of me. And then, you know, there's drugs, there's alcohol. I'm not saying all of them, but these skyrocket in trafficking, sex trafficking. And so it's been proven now, there's a lot of studies written about it, specifically from South Dakota, North Dakota. And then if you go up into Canada, where a lot of these companies are based, it's a big, you know, it's a huge problem. It needs to be talked about. And so that's what the missing and murdered Indigenous women, you know, that those 3 letters that are kind of spray painted on the side of the painting are talking about and addressing. So, and you can see there's that hot pink shot up can on the far right side is an element that's been coming through as well. So I just selected a handful of the paintings from this series to kind of show you, to give you an idea of what my work looks like now. This piece is called Talon. And really, it's just named after my friend. He came into the studio, and I was having a hard time, to be honest, like making this work the last 3 years. And then, of course, what it's been going on in the world the last 3 years. It was just it was hard. And I you know, I don't have a lot of friends, but Talon came and visited. And this is one of the only ones I didn't hit with the oil bar, because he just came in and he was like, "That's dope." I was like, it is. So I just like let it rest. And so this is a painting just with the acrylics and some of the spray paints. So for me, you know, just like learning to compose in different ways and changing my relationship with the oil paints. So this one kind of, I don't know, I like it though too as a talent. Like if you pick up a bunch of stuff and you drop it on the ground, and it kind of looks like an aerial perspective or view. And this is one of the other larger pieces that was finished from this series, and it's called Torture State. So you can see I showed you earlier the close-up of the bottom right-hand corner, which says back. So this is what, you know, how those stencils kind of come into play into a larger composition. So this piece, it's that warm pink, and that turn is this orange color, you know, that it just like radiated out. And my research was really in depth going into the torture program at Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later, or maybe I'll tell you right now. But this piece is definitely, I mean, it's pretty obvious, I think, what this is referencing. You know, what was going on in 2003 with the creation of the torture program. So what sparked this research is in that book, Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States, kind of in the end, she was writing about the creation of the torture program in 2003. And so what happened was it was George Bush, Dick Cheney, Times, their lawyer, John C.U., cited the hanging of the Modoc war leaders in the late 1800s as the legal precedent to start the torture program, which opened up Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib, which we're still doing to this day, 19 years later. So, you know, where I'm from, you know, I drive by Fort Klamath all the time where this lynching happened. My great-grandmother, Emma Ball, was 9 years old and was forced to go to Fort Klamath to witness this. And this is what they did. So, you know, this is an ongoing, recurring thing that goes on in our, U.S. history, United States history, and it's disturbing. I don't understand it, and so I kind of went down this long, very disturbing rabbit hole of studying, sadism and like what is this need to, first of all, lynch somebody, do it publicly, and document it, and then share the images around, which is like what happens, So it was just a really difficult topic, and I needed to express some of that research somehow visually, and so I ended up using this kind of this figure, a figure with the black hood, the orange jumpsuit, just being the terrorist. And so what is a terrorist? And so in this chapter, what Dunbar Ortiz discusses is that the origin of even the concept of terrorist is linked to the American Indian and the U.S. military man. So that's, they said, well, the Modocs weren't listening and they've resisted, being removed from their homelands and put on the Klamath Reservation. So therefore, that's the enunciation of a terrorist, and they fought back. If you fight back, then you're a terrorist. So that's actually what the kind of the core of that definition is in terms of the United States enunciations of its own sovereignty. So it's difficult if you kind of come back to that. So yeah, that's what this piece is, and I think it's a strong painting. I'm happy with how this came out. All right, I'm going to dive into some of the activism. I know I've been hinting at it and discussing it, but when I'm not painting it in the studio, I'm usually doing grassroots organizing, collaboration, and there's a lot of art that's made to be, on the front lines of these campaigns. So we'll kind of go over the Jordan Cove fight, and then Pihimaha, which is the shirt that I'm wearing today, Protect Pihimaha. Take a look at this. I'm gonna grab a sip of water. So yeah, at the beginning, Danielle kind of gave a land acknowledgement. This is a map of what's so-called Oregon, the state of Oregon, Northern California, Northern Nevada. So we're, all of our tribal lands. So where I'm from, where I was describing, you can see it's Upper Klamath Lake, where that pipeline, so Klamath Modoc. So the pipeline would have started in Malin, Oregon. It would have connected to the Ruby Pipeline, which is a Kinder Morgan pipeline that ended up going through Northern Nevada. Also Canadian frack gas. I think it's gone back and forth over 20 years to being an export terminal, import terminal, fracked gas, or the oil. But anyways, at this iteration, when I joined the fight after Standing Rock in 2016, I learned about that we have a huge pipeline fight in our homelands, and so it was 230 mile. Would have been. We've won now, so this pipeline is no more. But it was 15 years of like a lot of landowners. Yeah. You can see it's tribal lands, property owners. A lot of people were being threatened with eminent domain, that this company could just come and take your land because they want to shove a pipeline through it, which is crazy. This whole thing was insane, and when I learned about it, but unfortunately, there's so much money. These companies spend so much money in these states buying off politicians and everybody, tribes. I mean, I don't know what happened, but nobody wanted to talk about it for like 6 years. Let's just say that. So yeah, it would have been 230 miles from Malin to Coos Bay. They would have had to completely dredge Coos Bay so they can bring those huge LNG tankers in, the vessels that are like the size of 3 football fields. The export terminal itself, like I remember reading everything that this company was writing, it would have been a huge explosion. Like they called it, this would be a terrorist, could be a, what do you call it? Target, thanks Mom, yeah, a target, and they had literally hired 9 cops, Jordan Cove, trained them to protect this export terminal, and there was nothing there, like nothing. They haven't even got the permits yet, so they were already hiring police force. There was corporate cops involved. I mean, it was a crazy thing. But look where it was going, under 500 waterways across southern Oregon. We're talking the Rogue, Klamath River, the Umpqua River. I mean, this, it's not if, but when these pipelines burst, and with frack gas, that's when you can light water on fire. So this whole thing was just completely insane to me. And the more I looked into it, and we're talking about already living through wildfire seasons, so if these pipelines would break, it seemed in my mind like a completely crazy proposition, especially for gas that we weren't even going to use. It was going to be exported to Asian markets. So yeah, this is Upper Lake. This is where I walk all the time. You know, this is the waters. This lake is polluted right now. We're already dealing with that. You know, so all of this kind of brought me home. All of this, everything that's been going on. But really, it was that my connection to this land and the water. I love swimming in this water. Well, if you can, it's really, really cold. But kayaking, hiking, this is like where I go all the time. This is where we collect our tule. That's tule that grows in the lake. So, you know, we've weaving baskets and harvesting this tule for thousands and thousands of years. You know, we say time immemorial. So, you know, it took a lot of us to all come together to do this. And so this is me. I'm not doing it anymore, but I am a wilderness first responder, and I'm a guide. So I take people out on camping trips, hiking trips. So here we're with a big group. I don't know if you all know Doyle. This is when I first met Doyle Canning. She came down, and this is right in the root. This is one of those big trees that would have been taken down right in the root of the Jordan Cove pipeline. So we went hiking. Doyle and her husband were there, and then we met up with a lot of other people from Southern Oregon. So we worked across the board with organizing to stop this. And yeah, so I used my art though in this fight. So I was offered the governor's show, and I kind of knew I wasn't gonna do it, but I accepted it anyways, knowing I was gonna deny it, because I knew that Governor Kate Brown was really neutral on this issue, which was really infuriating to me, because a lot of times these politicians love to take photographs with Native people or showcase our work, but then like it's just a huge double standard. You know, you're not going to say anything about this huge pipeline, a fossil fuel pipeline that's like threatening how many waterways, all of this burial grounds. You know, I mean, it's just like atrocious in my mind. So I wrote a letter, and yeah, so I don't know if anybody read this, but yeah, it's basically kind of describing who I am, who my family is. You know, grandparents, great-grandparents are 1864 treaty signers of the Klamath Treaty. I do talk about, you know, my grandma witnessing the hanging of the Modoc war leaders, that we've been betrayed for 150 years, you know, over and over and over again by the state. And so I think that's why my dad stood up and, you know, fought his case. And I felt very passionate about this topic and issue. And so I declined the governor's art exhibition that year. And this was in tandem with my pieces that were actually that piece, No Man Camps Missing Her, was in the Portland Biennial exhibition was Disjecta, is now Oregon Contemporary. And so this is a kind of the examples of how my writing and my artwork do go hand in hand a lot of times. I don't know if a lot of people see that or understand that with my work, but I'm working on trying to figure out how to bring kind of the writing aspect and the visual expression, how you can use them in multiple ways. So this is me and my Samix, Asa Wright, and me and Asa met at Standing Rock at the art tent, and so Asa taught me how to screen print in freezing cold weather, and we were just like screen printing t-shirts, hoodies, everything, patches, and we just made a lot of art, and that was kind of how I was able to engage in fighting against the Dakota Access Pipeline in November of like 2016. It was so cold. And so we kind of brought all what we learned from there back here, and we've collaborated with, this is in Salem. At one point, a bunch of people took over the governor's office after, you know, we'd given some presentations. I didn't get arrested that night because I was really sick actually, and I had to get home. This is a different event, but yeah, this is like 6 years of just, you know, plugging along and showing up with our signs. And so you can see that sign in the far back. There's the no LNG with the blue and green. That was a design by Asa Wright. So it's a basket, one of our gambling basket designs that's kind of put in the state. So it's a really beautiful print right then. So we collaborated with Just Seeds, which is a really cool printmaking collective that shows up and supports frontline artists. And some of the other things, because this was like I think this was during COVID, because yeah, I didn't do Zoom before COVID stuff. But yeah, I organized this webinar, Indigenous Land and Water Protectors, Fighting Fossil Fuel Exports in the Pacific Northwest. And the reason I wanted to do this is because a lot of these projects, they're siloed, right? It's like, oh, this is no LNG, or this is a frack gas thing, this is a tar sands, dirty tar sands, oil tar sands. But basically what we're understanding is that the fossil fuel industry is wanting to create these export terminals all across the Pacific Northwest. So if you look at a map, it's not just Oregon, so this is, so I brought together people from different fights, and we all came together and had and this is still on Facebook, you can watch this. But, I was the moderator or the facilitator. So I brought on my friend Thomas Joseph, who's Hoopa, and a lot of us all met at Standing Rock. So Thomas, he was, gave kind of the prayer, so we were really wanting to do as much as we could kind of bring together like a Native, Indigenous perspective on how to talk about this. And so Thomas is a really well-spoken, beautiful speaker. And so he kind of grounded us, and then we brought in Slato, Molly Wickham, and she is from Wet'suwet'en. So if you're familiar, up in First Nations in Canada, they're fighting the Coastal GasLink pipeline, like right now. They are illegally drilling under their Wet'suwet'en, which is like their mighty, mighty river, this clean river. And up there, it's different. They didn't sign treaties. It's unceded. So the Crown, like there's no signing. It is Indigenous land. It's unceded land. They have their chiefs. I think that's Chief Woos, and Slato is the spokesperson for what's going on at those camps. They are getting raided by military. Like the RCMP are militarized with huge guns. So it's real. This is going on right now. They're really trying to build up awareness. So I really encourage people to follow Wet'suwet'en, Wet'suwet'en Strong. And I've screened films about this because they've been really fighting this for years and years and years. And they're even more, it's more violent up there. I mean, we saw violence at Standing Rock, but it's just Canada. It's pretty scary. So Conahoose Manuel is just a little bit south of Wet'suwet'en, and she's Sepwemic. And Sepwemic, there's lots of other nations up there, but they're fighting the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So these are these big mega oil pipelines. And her sisters, the Manuels, created a village called the Tiny House Warriors. So they built all these tiny houses, and they're literally right across from the man camp. So the man camps are up. They have big floodlights on them 24/7, but they're standing in the way of these pipelines, and they've been building international attention, and so these it's costing these companies a lot of money, and it doesn't look good for human rights. Let's just say that. And so really, what we're all kind of having to bring together is this the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, or UNDRIP. And so consultation and consent needs to be given for these companies to move forward. And what these resistance fights are showing is that they are not consulting. And if they are, it is shady. And so we won Jordan Cove Pipeline, yay! But these fights are still going on. So, I really encourage folks to learn about this. They call them sacrifice zones. And that's, so after beating Jordan Cove, on the last day of the last president's time in office, January 19th, we got I was prepared. I'd already made a statement. I thought he was going to push through the Jordan Cove, but it was the opposite. We won. So at that point, the state of Oregon was suing FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And it was amazing. We were like, okay, wow, we won. The same day or maybe a couple days before, Trump administration gave permits to begin the exploration for lithium in Fort McDermott, Paiute lands. So this is disaster peak. We beat the LNG pipeline, and right away during COVID, everybody's in lockdown and sick. They sent out 3 letters to 3 different Indian territories, and this company called Lithium Nevada, which is saying that was consultation to give permits to start exploration of lithium drilling in northern Nevada at a place called Thacker Pass, or Pehemaha. And so this is all right at the Fort McDermott Reservation. When I found out about this, I was like, no, this cannot happen. I grew up going to this place with my father like almost every summer, I think even before I was in the womb, or, this is a very sacred place to these people and to my father. He was really close with the Paiute people. And so before I even knew about this, I just was like, this place was calling me. I was like, I need to go back out to Fort McDermott. So where I live now, you just head out 140 to Lakeview and you just keep going, and you can just kind of cut through northern Nevada, and then you're at Pihemaha. And Pihemaha means rotten moon in Paiute. So I've been spending the last year and a half out there supporting the Paiute people, northern Paiute and western Shoshone people from lithium mining. So this disaster peak is, you can see it there. This is, Kayla and I drove out there through this. So where this is, the view from this is actually on the Oregon side. And there's an even larger lithium deposit on the Oregon side, which you all might know is like the Alvord Desert, the Steens Mountain. That's what it is, and they want to dig it all up. So they're kind of proposing to do this Thacker Pass, this one in Nevada first, and because Nevada is different than Oregon with the permitting processes. And a lot of these judges are just like good old boys and just giving them permits. And so I've been spending a lot of time out there supporting those people. And so Disaster Peak, though, is really special. And this is sacred homelands to the Northern Paiute, Western Shoshone, and Bannock peoples. So yeah, this is Ron. There's Myron Dewey's brother, Josh. Our Sundancer, Dallas Cummings, and Sundancer, Gary McKinney. And yeah, the Northern Nevada chapter of AIM has been out there supporting, American Indian Movement has been out there supporting them. So yeah, I've just been giving, like, kind of as a service, how I can support and bring organizing in to help them with this, because it's a huge thing, because they want lithium for these electric vehicles and many other things. So that's, we hear that push a lot. And so anyways, that's kind of the art and activism on the front lines. So yeah, that's my life for the past 4 years is what I've been up to. I used the word ghostwriter because I was doing that, that history into the ghost dance. I was also in mourning of my father passing. Kind of how do I recreate my, reimagine or it's it's a lot when you lose a parent, and especially my father, Al, was a really incredible person, and a mentor to me too, so I'm having to reassess that relationship. So doing all this stuff on the front lines, speaking, singing, I was like, geez, man, my art practice is more like performance art at this point. So I definitely felt like I've been doing more performance art, and my paintings I've been describing as more of a performative kind of painting practice. So here's all the work that came together in culmination. So it was a couple years. This show got postponed because of the pandemic. So this is the Land Back series at Ditch Project, so here in Springfield in August of 2021. And then 9 of those paintings went to the Portland Art Museum at Mesh, which was curated by Kathleen Ash Milby, who's the new Native American art curator at the Portland Art Museum. And yeah, this was awesome. I was just so happy to see the work at Ditch and then go to the Mark Building on the 4th floor of the Mark Building at the Portland Art Museum, which is like what I always considered like the good galleries, where like they get the contemporary. I don't know. There's some like hierarchy in museums of like where your paintings end up, and we got the 4th floor of the Mark Building. So I was super excited. You see in the background right there is Lynette Houses' mural, and it's a young Apache woman. She's from the Southwest, and Lynette also is, makes art for the front lines, and she's been creating a lot of art for the Oak Flat, which is the copper mining in Arizona. Yeah, it's Apache lands. And so, and I've got to meet now Wensler Nosey Sr., who's the main person running the prayer runs there. And they've been fighting Australian copper mining. So, the mining thing is it's coming to everywhere, and they want rare earth minerals. And when I say they, I'm talking about like foreign transnational corporations, and a lot of times they're coming from Canada or Australia. So Lynette, we got to meet, and we had a whole panel discussion. You can look it up at the Portland Art Museum, and it's kind of discussing. It was discussion about art and activism, and where this is more and more artists are kind of blending social justice work, environmental advocacy work into their art practices. For me, it really started coming together in this last series, relocating my practice back into my homelands, having the direct impact and inspiration from, from the lands and water, and from front lines of the who you meet, the spirit and the songs and the languages and the gifting and the feasting you get to do when you go out to meet, the Native people out in the front lines, and not Native people. That's the whole thing. It's really like collaboration and coming together. So this was a beautiful exhibition that came out of it. Here's two pieces, and from that, I think that is Missing and Murdered Indigenous People and Ghost Dancers. So those are about 12 by 36 each. And they are now in the collection of Bill Avery. There you go, Bill. And so this is kind of, you can see how all the paintings are coming together. And I thought it was cool too, because they put the stencils. So this is all the stencils and that pigments, and so they were on display. There's that shot up can that a lot of people really love, the pink can. There's some bullets. There's strange metallic objects that I found. So there's those paintings together. Oh yeah, this was this is an image I used in that chapter I'm writing. So the Ghostwriter chapter, it talks about the Jordan Cove struggle. It talks about the little history of the ghost dance. And what was interesting with the ghost dance is that it's so linked with the trains. So the creation of the railroads. So the railroads, once they're going through the Sioux are fighting the railroads, and like by the time they get out to Paiute lands, a lot of Native people would hop the trains and go visit other people. So it ended up being a way to go visit other tribal people and different. So there was a lot of, what do you call it, just like travel and meeting other people. And so Wovoka, who was the prophet, the Paiute prophet of where the ghost dance began. Well, they say that, so the reason I was researching this is because the Modocs are one of the very first of all the tribes, I think, that performed the ghost dance during the Modoc War in the late 1800s. That's in like the 1870s. Wovoka was more in like the 1890s, and he was really labeled kind of more of a prophet. But he ended up hopping these trains, and that's how he got around. And he ended up traveling and sharing the ghost dance, I think, to like 30 other tribes. And so, unfortunately, it's really sad. But that's in Pine Ridge and Wounded Knee, that's what that caused that massacre. They were ghost dancing, and then the government opened fire, and that's what that massacre was. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. So anyways, I thought I liked that image. And so this is the last slide, and you if you follow me, I'll let you know when the book comes out. But this is the book that I wrote that chapter for. It's quite a title. Transnational Feminist Art Pedagogies at the Intersections of Decoloniality. I haven't been doing a lot of work in academia, and I've really taken a nice break the last 4 years, just kind of working in my homelands. I've been a mentor, so I used to teach at Portland State University, and I taught at Portland Community College for a while, and I do enjoy teaching, but now I really like doing it in this kind of format, smaller doses, and I don't have to design like whole curriculums and stuff, but I still love engaging with students and working with audiences and viewers. So with that said, thank you all so much for coming and to the talk today. Thank you.